Hey girls, welcome to the Asterisk Podcast. I'm your host, April Biondolillo. Hey everyone, welcome to the Asterisk Podcast where I'm your host, April Biondolillo. I am beyond excited to be here today. That it is launch day for being transparent here. So many nerves. Podcasting, for whatever reason, just feels incredibly intimidating, but it has been really fun. What a wild journey of getting here. When I say there has been so much hard work behind the scenes, so many prayers over this day, over this first season, it's the truth. I am so blessed by my family, friends, and the growing community of Cherish for supporting me, getting hyped for this podcast. Y'all, it is going to be so good. I have an incredible lineup of women that are going to be sharing their story here, and I cannot wait for you to get a front row seat to all that God has been doing in their lives and just invite you to the table just to have real, honest conversation. As I was praying for what I wanted this podcast to be about, what I wanted the focus to be on, it really just hit me that at a young age, I really needed women to be bold enough to share the most vulnerable parts, to tell me. I almost was begging for someone to share where life was hard, to share where they were still figuring out who they were. Like, I needed someone to tell me that they struggled with the way that they looked, that they had insecurities, that sometimes they compared. And I felt like growing up in the walls of the church, it was no one's intention, but there wasn't enough space created for real conversations to take place. And so that is what the Asterisk Podcast is going to be all about. There is not a space where we're trying to say we have it figured out, that everything with Jesus is great. It's going to be raw. It's going to be transparent, because I know that there are listeners on the other side begging for someone to go first, begging for someone to make room for error, for vulnerability, for just the struggles in life that are very evident. It is amazing to me how many women really are just craving this need for community, this place for women to gather. And that's what I want this space to be, is community to come together, cheering and championing each other forward in each of our endeavors, whatever the stages or seasons that our life look like. No one is less than, no one is greater than. We are all here trying to do our very best. So as I was praying for what I wanted this first episode to be, I just wanted to share my own heart with y'all, my journey, why I started Cherish Ministry, what's the background behind it, why the Asterisk Podcast, all the fun things, because I know you're asking. And if you're not, well, guess what? I'm going to be answering it anyway. But it's just going to be a seat at the table. I figured who better to go first than probably myself. So a little bit of background for y'all if you don't know. I grew up in Fort Worth, Texas. If you haven't caught from the y'alls that I've said a couple of times, that's why. I tell people I grew up in the belt buckle of the Bible Belt, which basically meant I went to church a lot. And don't get me wrong, I loved going to church. Church was like my second family. And I didn't go because of obligation. I didn't go because mom and dad were saying you have to go. It was a joy to go. I looked forward to going. And that's really a shout out to my own family, my parents, because they modeled to me really well what it looked like to have an honest and real relationship with God. They made going to church exciting, and it wasn't something to check off a list. It wasn't just, hey, as Christians, this is something we do, but they modeled why Jesus was so cool and how to love him and be excited to be in a group full of people, a room full of people that also love Jesus. So I had an incredible upbringing, and I say that not to say it even lightly, because I know that's not everyone's story, but I also emphasize it because y'all, the enemy will go after each and every one of us just the same, whether you had a great upbringing or a terrible upbringing. And I had to really learn at a young age what it meant to really have a full intimate relationship with Jesus, because even though my parents modeled it, somehow growing up in the church, I started to believe this misconception. I thought that because Jesus was perfect, he only loved perfect people. So my life had to be perfect. And part of my personality is already wired that way. I find a lot of my identity sometimes in my accomplishments. I love when people are like, man, April's got it all together. She's leading so well. I love to have my hands in many things. The more hats in my life, the better. The more leadership opportunities, the better. And that started at a very young age in my life with this idea of, in order to be loved by God, I had to be perfect. When I was in the 4th grade, I switched from a public school, or from a private school to a public school, because I talked too much. It was time for change. And ultimately, it just made the most sense at that time in my life. And I was so excited to make all these friends. Like, I thought I had the best personality out there. It was going to come super naturally. And very quickly did my expectations change, and did hurt enter the picture, because in the 4th grade, I started to get very bullied for the way that I looked. I was labeled fat, I was labeled ugly, I was labeled weird, you name it. And words are very powerful, especially at a young age. And I remember we got a plan. My parents came in and met with the teacher to get the bullying to stop. However, every time I looked in that mirror, all I could see were all of those words. Like, those words now define me. I was labeled by those words. And it's amazing because you never notice anything wrong about yourself, or you never question anything until that first negative comment came. So as I went into the 5th and 6th grade, kind of entering middle school, I remember all the girls were being asked out for the first time. And when I say asked out, like going to the school dances, holding hands in the hallway, like super scandalous stuff. But those things weren't taking place for me. Like, guys weren't asking me to school dances, guys weren't wanting to hold my hand. So you take the words spoken over me at a young age and you partner that with rejection. And all of a sudden, it wasn't just like that I had this issue in my life where I wasn't being pursued, where I wasn't being noticed, where I wasn't being seen in that way. It was, I am the issue. All of a sudden, now my identity was, I'm an issue. And I remember very vividly my frustration towards the Lord as a young girl, thinking, why did you take so much time on everyone else and forget about me? And I didn't like a lot of the girls around me. All of my friends, they're getting all these opportunities and I'm not. And I so desperately wanted to fit into that mold. I wanted to experience what they were experiencing, and I couldn't. So when I was in the 7th grade, I got my first MySpace account. Shout out to all my MySpacers out there. If you're in my age range, MySpace was pretty legit. It was a great social media tool. Little did I know I was like low-key coding back in the day, and obsessed with it. Like, kind of nerdy, kind of weird, but also like, can I put that on my resume that I know how to code? I don't know. But I remember being on MySpace and I got this message from a stranger, a guy, telling me how beautiful I was. And I think to anyone else, they'd be like, stranger danger, get out, like totally weird. But I was so desperate to hear those words because I never had. And yes, I had a loving father and he could tell me that all day long, but I felt like he was obligated to. And I was desiring to hear it from the opposite sex. And so I began to have these seemingly innocent conversations with strangers online. And I'm not talking just like one or two. It was a list of guys. I don't know anything about them. I don't know where they came from, but they were just flooding in. And I thought I was so cool. And when I got in the 8th grade, I got my first cell phone. And now these conversations began to happen on this tiny little flip phone device. And I remember going to my friends and they would give me guys' numbers, guys from their schools. And I would just select every guy in my phone book and just send, hey. And it was like this high, just having this affirmation, these conversations. And truthfully, I got to be whoever I wanted to be. They didn't know me in person. We had never met. I could send pictures of myself that didn't quite look like myself. Nothing inappropriate. Just, I could make the angle. I could edit the photos. And I realized I could pretend to be just like all these other girls and they would never know the difference. How sad is it that April got so lost and didn't even know who she was and was pretending to be all these other people? But that was my reality, because the truth was I hated myself. I hated the way God made me. I was mad at him for not making me like her, and instead he made me like me. And I had to put in all this effort and come up with all this creativity just to fit in. So I thought. Later on, at the end of my 8th grade year, going into my 9th grade year, these seemingly innocent conversations took a corner and they turned into inappropriate conversations, what we would refer to as sexting. And I remember the first time I had engaged in a conversation like this, I didn't know necessarily what I was doing. It was kind of like my introduction to this whole sexual world. Yet I knew in my gut something was off. And I knew after the conversation was done, just feeling this guilt just sit in me. And now I had experienced shame. And I never experienced that before. Like everything before I was doing, it felt like I could justify it, but I didn't know quite how to justify this one. But amazing, sin always takes you further than you wanted to go, and it keeps you there longer than you wanted to stay. And that's exactly what happened in my life. I became addicted to sexting. I would have multiple guys that I was reaching out to, people that I didn't know, complete strangers, having these very intimate conversations. And what people don't talk about with addiction enough is there's a lot of side effects that come. And for me, there was a lot of anxiety and there was a lot of depression, because when I would get done with these conversations, reality would kick in of these guys have really intimate conversations, intimate messages from me, and they can do whatever they want with it. I don't know where they're going to say, who they're going to share it with, if they're going to post it somewhere. And so I would just live in this space of worry and this fear of what if people find out? What if people I know find out? Because it was a very obviously hidden thing in my life. And I got really good at hiding, really good at masking things in my life, because I knew how to delete the numbers. I knew how to hide everything on my phone so that no one would ever question, no one could ever find. And at the same time, right, like I'm super involved in church. I'm a leader in my youth group. Like all throughout the years, people have been looking at me as this strong leader. Like, oh, I want my child to be like April one day. New kids come to youth group. Oh, you got to meet April. Like, and I loved it. But yet I was so desperate for someone to see me, because no one was seeing what was really going on. But there was this struggle of I've got to be perfect. So I can mask it and I can fake it to everyone around me, but I knew that the Lord saw it. I knew that the Lord, truthfully, I felt like didn't want anything with me anymore. But with people, man, I could continue this. I could live this double life. They would never know. And I remember wanting to give up this addiction in my life. I don't even know if I said it out loud that I recognized that it was a sin, but I knew the way I felt after that probably shouldn't feel this way if it's something good for your life. And my friends weren't talking about conversations like this. So I knew I had passed a line. But at the same time, there weren't really a lot of conversations taking place at church about things like this. And I always wonder, if someone would have shared and been so vulnerable about this, maybe it would have helped me at a young age. Maybe it would have helped young 8th grade April to understand there was so much more to the story for her. But I never knew. And when we talked about sexual sin, if we did in a church setting, it was typically geared towards the guys. So imagine me, I felt, man, I'm disgusting. Like I'm a girl and I'm struggling with this. So again, it's not a peg at the local church. It just has grown over the years as this awareness, this thing that God stamped on my heart. We got to have these conversations. So that was my ongoing battle. I was wrestling between, God, I don't want this, but I don't know how to get rid of it. And I try to pray about it. I try to say I'll never do it again. I try to walk away. I try to delete the numbers, but I've memorized the numbers at this point because of how many times I've deleted and re-gotten them back. And at the same time, I just keep going back to this thing that I know isn't good for me. It's that verse that Paul talks about. If I keep doing what my flesh desires, where my spirit wants something different, and I'm weak. So I was really angry at God. I don't want this, but I don't know how to get out of it. This followed me all the way through my high school years, and it led to a lot of behavioral issues I was having at school, a lack of motivation. I wasn't eating well. I feel like I developed a lot of binge eating, and I just had no awareness of who I was. Therefore, I didn't put any effort into who I was. I look back at high school pictures and I think, yeah, maybe it's a little bit normal to wear like sweats and a t-shirt in high school, but like for me, it was every day. There was little to no care in any effort of my life. And that would flicker on and off depending if I was having a good week or a bad week when it came to this sexual struggle in my life. My junior year of high school, I went to a church summer camp. I went to church summer camp every year. Cute boys, lots of friends, why not? And I wasn't really anticipating or even expecting to have any kind of experience with the Lord, but it was the last night we were in worship and I hadn't really felt anything that whole week. Again, just kind of was like, yeah, why would I feel anything? God doesn't want me. Very angry, very distant, very set aside from all of it. But on the last night, I'm looking around and all of my friends are like really pressed in. Like they're crying, they're on their knees, they're in surrender. I could tell that they were really pressing in and they had really discovered this relationship with the Lord. And all that week, they've just been on this high talking about the Lord in ways we hadn't. And they were experiencing something. And I was so jealous and so angry because it's like, oh my gosh, I can't even experience this. Like, I want this, but I can't have it. So I thought, and I remember being in this time of worship, and I was like, okay, God, you see it, you know my struggles, you know where I've been. None of it is a surprise to you. So I guess I have nothing to lose, but if you still want me, in the midst of all of this, in the midst of the mess of my life, I think I might want that. And it was the first time that I had allowed myself to mute all of the lies, all of the voices, and get close enough to allow God to speak where I would hear him. And I remember Carrie Jo was leading worship and she came out in this moment. She started to sing these lyrics from a song that have completely transformed my life. She said, I know that you are for me. I know you will not forsake me in my weaknesses. And in that moment, I got it. I fell to my knees and I began to weep because for my whole life, I thought God saw my room as a mess, saying, you got to clean it up in order for me to come in. I only choose perfect people. So clean up this mess and then I can have a relationship with you. But in that moment, I heard God say so clearly to me, April, this sin will not define you. I will. And it was this image of he didn't even see the mess in my room. He just saw me. And he was right there in it with me. And I just wept before the Lord because I was so in awe that a perfect God could love an imperfect person and that he could want me. And I remember if I left that moment and I didn't share what God was doing, I would just go right back and pretend that moment didn't happen. And so every night after youth camp, we would have a moment of testimonies where students in our youth group would share what God was doing. And I don't know why the Lord led me to this. I mean, I do know now looking back at it, but I remember my youth group was about 100 kids. My parents were leaders. And again, I was like a leader in my youth group. No one knew this was going on. They had no hints or nudges or suspicions. It was going to be a complete shock. But I remember mustering up the courage to get in front of everyone and just share, for the last few years, I've been struggling with sexting. And I fell to the ground because I could feel the chains fall around me. And I thought that my youth group would be in shock. People wouldn't know how to respond. People would be freaking out. But instead, it was the most beautiful picture because they embraced me. My youth pastor embraced me. The students embraced me. And I remember as if the Lord put my chin up and said, I want you to watch this. And right after I had shared that, I heard student after student share similar struggles. And I was in shock because I thought, well, church is for perfect people. So I was the only one struggling. But little did I know, many people were struggling. And that's exactly what the enemy does. He isolates you with these lies to make you feel convinced that you're alone, that you could never share something so vulnerable out loud because it would be everything against you. But I discovered the exact opposite, and I knew right then that the Lord was saying, April, I'm going to take your story from place to bring healing and restoration. And from that moment, I knew that my life was stamped for ministry. I had no idea in what way and what shape, but it was so amazing because if I go back to journal entries that I started doing, I've always been someone to write. I've always had that desire, and I even wanted to be a writer one day. I remember having that thought, but if I went and looked through my journal entries, you could see this word cherish everywhere. Proverbs 4:23 was a verse that God always spoke to me of guard your heart for it determines your future. And it was this idea of I kept going and searching for something external to fix this internal issue. And the Lord was saying, just cherish, April, cherish this time with me. I have something for you. Your worth's within you. And I have pages and pages of this because, like I said before, it was the struggle. I loved the Lord. I wanted to be a part of what he had. I loved being at church. I loved hearing these stories and about his character, but I couldn't accept that he could do that for me because I was so much a sinner. And I remember after high school, I graduated and I went to Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, Oklahoma to get a ministry degree. Again, I knew I was stamped. My life was stamped for ministry, but again, I had no idea in what capacity that would look like. And in my freshman year, it got hard. I didn't have a roommate. I was in a room all by myself, and where people talked about this idea of coming forward with these addictions and how you could pray and walk away, that was not my story. I definitely learned that, sure, healing can come in an instant, but it also can be a process. And for me, it was a process. It's like the story of Naaman in the Bible. He had this terrible skin disease, leprosy. He wanted to be healed by the prophet Elisha, just this quick, instant moment. And I had prayed for that moment all my life. Just heal me, God. Take this away. Take this desire away. Take it away. And it would still be there again and again. I would have this time reading my Bible. It would be so powerful. I'm in this Christian environment at school. Like, it's going to be easy. And it was the hardest time of my life. And just like Naaman, he wanted that quick, instant healing. But what ended up happening is he was instructed to go bathe in the Jordan River 7 times. And if you don't know, the Jordan River was pretty nasty. It was like, hey, put me in Damascus. That's clean. Like, why would I go with this nasty skin disease into a nasty water? But sometimes the reality, and I just want to be real to any girls out there struggling with any form of addiction, healing is messy. The healing process is not simple because you have to face things. You know, in my life, I always just wanted to remove this sexual addiction. And if you imagine a tree, I wanted just to remove the bad fruit from the tree. But what was going to grow back? Bad fruit. God was saying, I want to heal you from the inside out, April. I don't want to heal just the external things, because when I shared at that youth camp my junior year, I gave up my cell phone. I got rid of everything. But then when it was time for it to come back, I struggled again. Why? Because I hadn't dealt with the root issue. And the root issue was that I had this lie of rejection from a very young age that I had to replace with the truth of how accepted, how loved, how pursued I really was. And so my freshman year was a real battle. I got into counseling. I was finding mentors in my life, and I said, I need to surround myself with the truth. I need help. And I had to continue to be vulnerable, not just once, but moment by moment with the ongoing struggle that I was facing, but I so desperately wanted to overcome. Going into my sophomore year of college, I had an opportunity to be a chaplain on my floor, which basically meant I was going to get to pastor young women that were also living on the floor with me. And again, I knew God had called me to ministry, and I really had this heart's desire to meet with women, because even in my freshman year, I was finding so many girls that were struggling with similar things. And it was if like they were just that like I was a magnet for it. Like they just kept coming. Like I knew that the Lord was saying, April, I have something for you. It's something in your story. Like I knew, but I also felt so much guilt because, okay, but God, I'm still struggling. Like I haven't overcome. How can I speak and witness to others and be real when I haven't fully overcome? And when I got the opportunity to be a chaplain, I went through the whole process of interviewing, the application process, and I felt as if I had to confess to the leader of, hey, I kind of have this addiction to sexting and I'm doing all the things that I know to do. I'm going to counseling. I'm being real about it. I want to see it gone, but I just got to be honest with you. Like, I feel like God has called me to be in this pastoral ministry role, and I have no idea what that looks like, but I also have this thing over here. And it was the first time someone explained to me the difference between struggling and struggling well. Struggling is, I've got this, I can handle it, I'm going to keep it hidden, no one's going to know. Struggling well is, man, I am shining the light on this thing, I'm bringing people in, and I know it's a sin and I want to overcome it. And I remember when I went into my mailroom to open up the envelope to see whether or not I'd become a chaplain. As soon as I opened it, all these little confetti pieces came out everywhere. And I wept because, again, it was this reminder that God doesn't want perfect people. He just wants us to be real. He wants us to be present. He wants us to share with others that, hey, I am struggling, but I am choosing Jesus, that I'm still having these thoughts, but instead of going to it, I'm going to choose to really dive into my relationship with the Lord, which is meaning I'm going to get some girls around me to help me. And so as I became a chaplain, it was the most incredible years of my life, just getting to do life with girls and realizing this struggle. And God was really just placing more and more of a desire for this idea of cherished ministry, a place and space for women to gather, to be real, to share their stories with where they compromise and settle and compare in their worth. Because the amount of girls that I was meeting and struggling in that same realm, it was like this peace to know I wasn't alone, but it was also this complete frustration of, why aren't we talking about this? Where do girls find the truth about themselves? Because again, it's not a bad thing with the church, but most of the times the pastors are men. And if we're not doing a good job of creating environments for women, are they going to come forward and share these struggles with their worth with a man? I don't know. So I was like, God, you're going to have to use me. You're going to have to help me create a space so girls can overcome and walk in confidence who you've called them to be. I went on a mission trip in my college years to Uganda, Africa. It was a preaching focused trip, which I really don't know why I picked it. I never preached before in my life. Like I didn't even know that was something God had put inside of me. But on this trip, it became evident, not because of me, but what the Lord was doing in me, that He was calling me to be a communicator, which was so profound because for me, I used to send out all these inappropriate messages, and now God was redeeming it with a message of redemption, a message of healing. And just like Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times, I felt like God was coming back like He did to Peter, saying, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? He was coming back to redeem the broken areas of my life for something greater. When I graduated from Oral Roberts University in 2016, I still felt a little intimidated of like, where in ministry am I supposed to land? So I went and did an internship in Snoqualmie, Washington at a church with their youth ministry for 6 months. After 6 months, that turned into a full-time position as a youth pastor, and I ended up being in Snoqualmie for about 5 years. And that was such a wild and yet incredible experience because I was in an unchurched area. And here I am, this Southern girl from the Bible Belt of Texas, trying to share who Jesus is. And really, I'm getting all these questions of how do you walk this out? What does it mean? And I mean, really great questions. And I'm looking at myself like, wow, why do I believe what I believe? Like, how do I explain this to someone that doesn't know? You can't just quote scripture at people. Like, you have to do life with them. You have to know them. You have to understand them. And it was as if God was just taking me deeper to an understanding. And I met with one specific girl that you'll hear later on in this podcast, who's my intern now, who really just launched the idea of it's time to bring Cherish to life. I felt like in 2020, so much was happening, rethinking everything in ministry. And I really was just praying and seeking the Lord of, okay, like, I think I'm ready. Like, I was so nervous to start something on my own. Like, did I have the skills? Did I have the knowledge? Did I have the wisdom? And I felt like God was saying, it's time. And so I really committed to prayer. I had gotten married just a couple months before all this. And so that was already causing a shift in what our journey was going to look like. And I started an Instagram page in 2020, and it was really just figuring it out as I went. I just got a bunch of girls in our youth ministry and girls that I would meet, and I would take photos and do life with them and just post these encouraging words and have stories. I had friends come on and share their testimonies. And I was like, man, I just want this to be a space where women can see other girls and their struggles and what they're walking through, so people know that they're not alone. Because yet again, little April in 8th grade so desperately needed someone not to come all polished and put together and talk about Jesus. She needed someone broken, someone raw, someone real to say, hey, I'm struggling. That's what I needed. And so that's what the Instagram page was all about. Come 2021, I stepped away from my full-time youth ministry job to officially launch Cherish Ministry as a 501c3. My husband and I, we moved to Texas, and I started doing all the paperwork. I had to learn how to get a website up, how to do all the tax paperwork. I was completely overwhelmed because I was like, wow, now that I'm doing this, I have to know like the accounting. I got to know the tax paperwork. I've got to have like someone for a website and marketing and what's the vision, and I've got to put together a board. And I was feeling completely overwhelmed, but the Lord just took me step by step and just reminded me of the why of I want girls to know their worth. I want girls to walk confidently in who they are. I want community because I so desperately needed community. I was so over the surface level friendships and relationships. I wanted deep. I wanted real. I wanted women that were pursuing the Lord in an authentic way. So in 2021, we had our first ever Cherish conference, and it was incredible. I said 2021. It was actually 2022. And it was absolutely beautiful. We had over 100 girls in the room, and I don't even know how to explain what that moment was like to see your dream come true in that way. And it was nothing about me. It was thinking about, again, my younger self. And if I would have been in an environment like that where I could have heard so many real and authentic struggles, but yet pursuing the Lord, I think it could have changed my life. And I'm so thankful for my story that I have, because I know that there's power in it, not because of me, but because of the Lord, in reaching people and helping young people know it's okay if you're not okay. It's okay if you wrestle. God's not after perfect. He's just after you, and he loves you. So often in my life, I knew that only God could be the creator of my life, but the enemy can't create. He can only imitate. And I fell for so many imitations. And when you're in a room surrounded by women that are being authentic, that are being real, that are being transparent, being vulnerable, there's no room for imitations. You can't imitate something like that. Like, that was the real deal. And it was incredibly powerful. In 2022, my husband and I made another move from Texas to Washington. I'll have to do a podcast episode on my husband and I and our journey. It's been absolutely wild, but we moved to Tri-Cities, Washington. That's where we're located right now. And we got to do our second conference for Cherish. And this year, it was a lot of reestablishing. I mean, it was a whole new group of people having to meet and build relationship, but so incredibly fun. Again, over 100 girls gathered in one room, new people involved, more women involved, and getting to do pop-up events. And now we're launching this podcast, and all of these events, from podcast, from conference to blog posts to this podcast, it's all about so many different things. It's about, equipping the listeners on the side with materials, with real life stories to know, hey, this is how you can walk it out. We want to engage you. We want to empower you to be confident in who you are, how to speak the truth over your life. It's all different measures. It's all different ways in which we can reach people, and all different medians and how to reach different women that are listening on the other side. It does not matter the stage or age or demographic or whatever, label. I mean, all are truly welcome here. When we came to Tri-Cities, I got the opportunity to be the director of the Union Gospel Mission at the Women and Children Shelter, which has brought so much more depth of understanding of how the lies of the enemy at such a young age can completely change and transform your life, and how much work it takes to give up all the other external things, the codependency, the drugs, the alcohol, the addictions that we all can find ourselves in, whether it's shopping or scrolling through social media, putting that all aside to be like, this is who I am in Christ. This is how I can walk confidently in Christ. And I'm no longer going to, think less of myself because of fill in the blank. Cherish is something that has always been etched on my heart from a very young age. And it took my own journey of discovering the Lord and being real with myself. And throughout the next couple of podcast episodes, you'll get to hear about even just the fact of relationships I've been in that I had to let go of, or walking through singleness and loneliness, being in ministry roles as a female, and challenges in so many different areas of where I could have struggled to place my worth, and how every time going back to, Lord, this is just for you. This is you and I walking this out, and whoever gets to be a part of it gets to be a part of it. But my heart is always going to be stamped for young women to fully know who they are, to be loved by God. And so the fact that we're here, the fact that we're recording this episode, it is incredibly wild to me in the best way possible. So ladies, thank you so much for listening. This is just the beginning of what God has in store for Cherish Ministry, for the Asterisk podcast. Like I said earlier, you're going to get to hear from so many more incredible women and their stories and the things that they have walked through, whether that's struggles with body image or relationships or singleness or comparison or mental illness, wherever those struggles are, mental health. I mean, there's so many areas where we can struggle to place our worth. And my goal is to make this the most transparent space for you to come and listen and just be like, wow, it is so nice and encouraging to hear someone else out there struggling in the same way, and knowing that I'm still loved and seen by God, and He wants me. Someone broken like me, He wants me. So make sure that you are subscribed to this podcast, that you're following along, getting all the updates, because it is going to be the best time ever connecting with you guys and building this community. So I love you all, and I can't wait to chat again with you all so soon.